Okay, I'll call to order the meeting for East Haddam Planning and Zoning Commission for January 14th, 2020.
Yeah, wrong date.
Yeah, the date on here is wrong.
Oh, look at that.
Can I have the attendance, please?
Barry Brownell,
Here.
James Curtin,
Here.
Justin Anderson, absent. Bernard Gillis. Here. Ed Gubbins.
Here.
Charlie absent. Louis Salakrop.
Here.
Susan Kinson.
Here.
And Jose.
Here.
So I'll have you sit in for Justin and Joe for Richard this evening. Okay. Minutes of our past meeting, which would be December 10th, 2019.
Read them over, I didn't find anything on that.
I have an amendment under the Section 8 public hearing, second paragraph, last sentence. The enrollment will increase from 30 to 50 children and will include an infant and toddler program. She said she'd be looking to bring in children as young as 6 weeks old. And also in the last paragraph, Mr. Gubbins suggested a stipulation in the daycares, that should be an apostrophe S. Insurance.
Anything else? Okay, so something that says amended. Bills.
Got one from Halloran and Sage, but most of it is not ours. Only the November 18th billing for a review of the new draft on accessory units. $74.
That part is ours.
That's ours, and then the rest of the selectmen's.
And we got the whole thing here, huh?
I made the phone call, so they just assumed.
You got it.
Motion to pay the bills?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Accept the motion to change the order of business?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, discussion. Regulation review, agricultural regulations. This is our last read, right, of these, before we send them off?
Could be, it could be,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm just, it's been a month. So
Yep.
Trying to remind myself where we are.
So the, I put draft on top, 1/14/2020, just so we knew where we are. And the front page is what exists now. And I kinda was, after this, is just gonna write it up. When we go and make a decision, obviously I'll have to change some of the permitted use of residential zones based on section 29, and I think I'll make it the short story and then see section 29 for specific details for agricultural uses. But I think to Rich's statement, he wanted to be able to look in each district to see what was permitted so that it wasn't in separate spots, at least it had a reference to it, so that would accomplish that. When we get to the main body of a new section, section 29, they took care of the slaughtered R raised in, which was a typo. And also, there were several sections where we talked about livestock and changing it over to adult on that part. So that was taken care of throughout. This proposal has, the 3 levels, the hobby farm, which can't meet the existing setbacks, then the standard farms, and then the intensive commercial farms. So that really didn't change perspectively wise, on that. I left in the Connecticut general statutes, and then we talked about some discussion about wetlands in there. And I just tacked on what are wetlands definitions, just for your knowledge, and what's allowed and what's not allowed, but I said there's no sense folding in a wetlands regulatory aspect into it. If you had a wetlands agent and a planning and zoning agent, and a, you know, which it's all in one office, so we kinda, when people come in, we talk about all the things that are necessary, including Army Corps jurisdiction, which we've been doing right along. I think what we said was that the next step I would go to the Ag Commission with these drafts for their input, and then come back to you. Remember right from last meeting.
Questions, comments?
The Ag Commission has weighed in on this.
They haven't since 2016, so I think it's time to go back, you know, with the revisions and changes and discussions and,
With these changes, you mean?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it's going to go to that.
Yeah, if, once you guys are good with the base, I'll go talk to them about that. Get on their agenda for one of their regular scheduled meetings and.
This is what we're talking about, so.
Yep.
You know, for the background, for those that knew it, obviously I had said at the previous meeting, the hobby farms are for the ones that just can't meet the regulation, yet we're trying to be a rural community, and you know, when I have someone come up and say, just wanna have a few little animals, and they're told no, and then on the other end, we avoided a disaster on the intensive commercial end of it, and the state moved in, when somebody took a building and just walked in with 10,000 birds in a building that wasn't suitable for it, so we wanna avoid that again. So that's kind of the shortest story for this.
Well, if we send it off to the Ag Commission, then we still have a chance to look at it again and
Right.
stuff. How does
Give
that
it a
sound?
shot,
for everyone? So, yeah. I mean, or we could wait till our next meeting, everyone has more time to look
When do
at
they
it.
meet? Once a month?
Once a month on the,
Once a month.
When's your next meeting?
what's the,
They just had a meeting this week, so another month.
okay,
So we could wait
First
until,
Monday of the month.
okay, so why don't we table this until next
It's
commission,
not an emergency.
meeting, that way everyone has a chance to look at it, and then we can send it off to them. How's that sound?
That's fair.
Okay. Okay, CBIG district. More trees. Oh,
no, I think we were gonna set up a subcommittee for that and move on, right, other than, cause I handed out you the existing regs to kind of look at and discuss, and if there was anything, but I thought, you know, that was also a point where we were looking to. Yeah.
let's see.
Just refresh my memory.
Yeah. Previous, not last meeting, the meeting before, EDC selectmen and.
Okay. We haven't had a chance to schedule that meeting.
No, but we have basically got a committee put together, so when
Okay.
you're ready, I'll give Jim the names and then we should make sure that everybody is notified and agendas are sent out.
Okay. Because I know we were trying to balance that other one downtown street. Have you been able to get a hold of Mike Zuma for that meeting, for the 6th?
Yeah, basically, right now, we're talking February the 6th.
Correct.
Okay.
Since your commission was calling it, it's in your hands.
Yes.
Okay,
And I will get back to Jim on that and make sure that that works for him for February the 6th.
okay.
And that's open to all of the commission members, so.
Right. Everyone got the notice about that for a special
No,
meeting?
two didn't. I just realized this afternoon, I sent an email out. I sent the old email instead of the new email with your name on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just recognized it this today, so it was, February sixth, Thursday. And we'll all get an agenda, because we don't have a room.
Right.
Wait, where is your room? Which room do you usually have?
Right here.
Oh, so meeting room one.
Email from him.
No worries.
Okay. So we'll go that route.
So is there any appetite for expanding the CBIG zone?
No, I think Rich brought it up for discussion to look at overall, now that we have
A lot of empty spaces.
empty space, now's the time to look at it and see if there's upgrades that we can do that could enhance development. Is there changes that are needed, not needed? And that's why I handed everybody out the existing regs to kind of look at and think about.
Yeah, before we go into the full, I think we just want to kind of keep it small. You know, like I think Lou and Joe are on the Town Street side, and Rich and myself, and actually I was gonna see if Ed wanted to join us for that, since you lived in Mudas for a while. And then we'll come back to the commission again. Does that sound fair? You know, until we get it, and then we'll bring everyone on board. So, I guess we just have to pick a time.
Okay.
I'm pretty open. I guess Rich isn't here. Ed's retired, but you might be going on vacation soon.
No, I'm staying around this year.
Okay.
I'll be around.
So,
Suffer with the rest of us.
It's been
you
warm
were
so
already
far.
on one, so I figured I gotta spread it. Okay.
It's gonna get cold.
Okay, so I'll get back to you on,
Yeah.
as soon as Mike gets word from Mike that he can make that.
Well, that's for the other one, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Mudas.
Then the Mudas one, you pick that date and time. and
Okay.
put it together.
Jim, you think I could get a map of all the different commercial zones? I had one someplace, and I can't find it.
Can't put your finger on it no more, can you? Yeah, I'll make copies of everybody, the breakouts of the
Yeah.
CBIG, the East Haddam, and then the East Haddam Village.
Thank you.
Can do.
Okay, CEO report, Jim.
All right, well, first thing is, give everybody copies, we have CCM is putting on a municipal training Thursday, January 30th. It starts at 5, ends at 8, and it is how to run legal and effective public meetings. But they're coming here, so it's a great opportunity. But as Lou and I found, just call me if you wanna go, because.
Oh, that's a horror.
Well, you're not, the problem is you're not a CCM subscriber. So next thing you know, it's a nightmare. And I called the kid up and I said, nothing for nothing. You're gonna scare volunteers away from trying to sign up. So I'm gonna take everybody's names from the commissions, and I've had people from, in the wetlands and ZBA, you know, say they also wanna go and attend. And, I said, I'll just give you a list of the names, and we'll go from there. She said, just have it to me by the 24th, so.
Should let, is this just for town-wise, or is it open for other things?
Well, they went and submitted it, you know, to all the towns. And-
Gateway, they need to know how to run a meeting.
Okay, I will, okay. I will,
They know they don't wanna do it.
I'm just saying.
okay,
And
so
I sit on the commission.
I will extend the invite. Yeah, yep.
Maybe I should go. Okay, anything else, Jim?
I am getting responses from the letters I sent out and the phone calls I made about seasonals, and we are on the, you know, some of these people actually have the ability to convert, so we're working with them on the path
Okay.
to success, what they need to do.
Might have snow this weekend, so.
Might have snow this weekend, you know.
These are all lake houses or
Huh?
lake houses?
Yeah. And then, you know, some of it's a case of, oh, my realtor told me it was okay if I came up here once in a while. I said, you've been there for 3 weeks straight. You know, so you go through this, and I've got my 35, give or take, collectors of stuff. So I've been making phone calls, and I have a lot of people don't want to pick up certified mail, so the next round's been just send it regular mail and see if they'll accept it. After that, you send it in a red envelope so they think it's Valentine's. Right? You know, knock on the door, the lights are on, no, but nobody wants to answer. Dogs barking, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, I didn't think I was that scary, but so that's a constant.
Are we all set with Solomonville Road there?
No,
No?
no, that's another one where he knows I'm
Not
coming,
going.
but he's avoiding me coming again.
Who's that?
Hold on.
Oh.
I mean, that's just
Ongoing.
ongoing, and it's, you know, that and several other places where they have the compulsion is to collect and collect and collect until there's no room, and then keep collecting. Not that it'll ever get used.
Has anybody been to the transfer station lately? You just see what that whatnot corner looks like Walmart.
A lot of stuff there.
Oh,
They'll clean it out.
You can go in your PJs then.
And I gotta say, Don knows which ones are a pain, and he tells them, get your hands off of that. You're gonna make a mess in your yard, stop it. I've watched him do it. He goes, no, that is for people that have a need. Not for you. We're gonna put it in your vehicle, it's gonna sit there for 8 weeks, and then you're gonna put it in your yard, and Jim's gonna have to give you a violation notice. He's be very blunt about it, which he has to be. I mean, the whatnot corner has a great use, and for, you know, people that have things that are still good condition, and give it to somebody else rather than throw it in the trash heap, but
College students.
Yeah.
people with little kids, perfectly
Kids,
good
yeah.
toys.
Yep.
I got rid of a lot of toys there. So,
Right, because it was, this weekend it was horrible, I mean, it was just so junky looking.
It's probably right after Christmas.
well,
Yeah.
right after,
Yeah.
right around the holidays, it really.
Spring cleaning.
Yeah, exactly.
Going back to Milan, what's the status of the old property that he had?
the old property is now in possession of the town of East Haddam. The old property had kudzu in it. It's called the mile-a-minute weed.
Yeah.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife recognized it there, and they are aggressively trying to treat it before it gets out of hand. If you want to see something devastating, just go on the webpage and dial up mile-a-minute weed for kudzu, and you'll find out that it can engulf an entire house. It engulfs trees, and then they die and they fall down, and it just keeps on going and going. So they've actually gone in and done at least 3 herbicide applications, and we estimate to get it knocked down, it might take 2 more. Wow. The stuff is fast growing, 90 feet in a year.
They can't just do a burn since there's nothing really there.
You gotta actually hit it so it sucks it back down to the roots and kills the roots. If you burn it, the roots are still there. It's tough.
Does that travel underground also?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Big bamboo.
Yeah.
No, the poisons, you mean?
Yeah. So that's the status. Once we have that under control, well, then it's all along we thought that, make a nice little spot for a park and all that sort of stuff. But right now, everything's on hold until that's under control.
So the idea is to keep that in the town ownership.
Yeah. Unless the state for some reason decides they want to accept, ownership of it. Well, it's adjacent to their
I was
Not
just borders
something-
the park.
park. Yeah.
It's not something you'd sell.
I wouldn't bother.
No.
It has it has a very interesting history as being, a lot of firsts. I mean, it was one of the first mill sites in East Haddam. It's the first site for electricity. They used to make lumber pieces. They used to mill out there. They were 40 and 50 feet long.
Yeah.
It's had 3 fires on it. So don't build another thing. It's probably gonna,
But it is a buildable lot.
May not be. The well was across the street. which was a shallow well. If you go there's a little shallow well on there. And you know, you think about it, it was a convalescent home, and before that it was a power plant, all that stuff.
And now it's just empty.
It's empty, yeah. and
How is it a convalescent home in a shallow well like that?
You know,
State lights.
absolutely amazing.
The good old days.
Yeah,
But anyway.
Yeah, no water testing back then.
Okay, since we're starting a new year, and right now we're reviewing the agricultural regulations, we've got the CBIG district, we're looking at Town Street, is there anything, and I'm not gonna put you on the spot right now, but the next meeting or this meeting that you feel that the commission needs to start to look at again, or to review, or to look over again? We've been doing this for the last 8 to 12 years. We've redone all our regulations. We just got done doing the brand new plan of conservation and development. We have time. So I'm putting it out to the commission. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, see what everyone feels the town should be doing and how we can help. And that's where we're gonna start to head towards. Because there's not a lot of development right now, so we do have time, as we all know. So, I think our regs are pretty good at this point. We've pretty much buttoned everything up.
Yeah, I think working on the CBIG and looking at what other
Correct.
commercial zones would be a bad idea to
Yeah.
see what
Well, we-
enhancements or
Yeah.
require, you know, things to help people out with.
But just
Pay
cycling
for
back to
everything.
ZEO for a minute, I'm just wondering that clothing drop off in front of
Exactly.
Shag Park, does that get picked up on a regular basis?
I think so.
I'm not sure what the schedule is, no, I can ask, but why
Yeah.
is it? There's some days I go by and there's nothing, and then other days it's like a
Alright,
bomb went off.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. No, I mean, something
Today-
gets up, but is it regular enough?
Today is a bomb, yeah.
Today's the bomb.
It was last weekend.
Is that the same one that used to be over by Sanibel's? Remember, it was over there.
So where they moved it?
It had been, there was one by Sanibel's,
Yeah, I remember
and then
that. Yeah.
it must be over there.
Yeah.
So, then it was one across the river.
I mean, if
So-
it's picked up on a regular basis, that's one thing, but if it's, becomes a collector, I would think Fred would be concerned, you know.
Yeah.
Shine a light on his business.
Correct. Okay, anything you wanna talk about right now? Jim?
The only thing is a hard copy of this year's schedule of meetings. I know Joe asked for one, having them.
Do we wanna try for a blight type thing now that we have a new selectman that might wanna work?
I got yelled at today because there's a certain building next to him on Mount Parnassus that hasn't had any activity in 15 years, and I said, well, he goes, what do you mean there isn't a structure blight ordinance? I said, there isn't.
I still have it.
But that falls under the selectmen, not us.
Right, but
Yeah.
we
That's up to them what they want, how they wanna handle it.
because we were rewriting that, and do we wanna try to resubmit that for, just for some sort of a, just to get an idea of what the feel is with the new regime?
I can forward the old one for review.
Let's go that route. Okay.
Cause and a lot of people bring that up to me and ask me about that, so,
But like I said, that falls under them,
right.
not us. So, we can help them out. I think they asked us, if I'm not mistaken, to help
Actually, it was,
draft something.
first was EDC asked us,
Yes.
and then we drafted it and we forwarded it to the selectmen.
Okay.
That was
And it was really around
You know-
vacant buildings more than
the blight ordinance.
lawns and things like
Yeah.
that.
You know what they say about the squeaky wheel, though?
Guess I entertain a motion to take a break before 8 o'clock.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we will reconvene at 8 o'clock. Nothing.
I know, well. Good thing.
So Ed, good Mason.
And, Turner's talking about, trying to get people to give their names, and that's all she's concerned about.
Yeah.
So I know.
I'll take care of it. Not my first rodeo. You haven't seen one this big, have you?
I think when
Just getting excited, we lost the screen already.
Okay, so I'm gonna call the meeting to order, it's 8 o'clock. The East Hampton Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, January 14th, 2020, at 8 PM at the Municipal Office Complex, Meeting Room 1 and 2, 1 Plains Road, Moodus, Connecticut, to hear the following. Proposed amendments to the change to the floating zone regulations for the planned recreational development resort zones. Proposal is to allow more than 4 units in a building that exists prior to the floating zone application. At this hearing, interested persons shall be heard and correspondence received. I want to note that this is not about what Banner may plan to do. It is only about possible change in our regulations. So nothing is going to be addressed on what possibly could happen there. I won't entertain any questions about it. This is about a zone change only. It's not open to the public, man, at this point. Okay.
So we have a request from Banner Estates to modify the regulations. These regulations have been in place since 1973. They substantially haven't changed, and when they originally were designed, they had a limitation of no more than 4 buildings together, 4 units together at a time. So they have requested, and when you make a zone change, it just doesn't apply for the property, just like if you had a residential property and you asked that you allow 2-family where one's allowed. It doesn't apply just to the single property, it applies to.
Chairman, point of order, I can't hear him.
Alright, I'll speak louder.
Don't you have a microphone up there?
Yeah, I do, it's right here. Okay, there we go, better? Alright, so the regulation change, when you ask for a regulation change, depending on which section of the book it applies to, it covers everywhere where it possibly applies. So you can't just write a regulation for a single property. So the request that's before falls under the planned recreational development resort zones, which is the in our regulations, and it covers the areas that are our zone on the map, which includes from a visual, it does include Banner, it does include sections of North Moodus Road, it covers sections of Cherry Swamp, and then all the way down to what used to be Sunrise and Cave Hill and Clark Crest and Johnsonville. So the regulation.
Is Shady Brook part of that?
Shady Brook's a half-acre zone, so it's not in that, no.
Ken, Mr. Chairman, Bernie, I couldn't hear what you said. Could you ask a question? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm the chairman.
I asked if Shady Brook was part of the resort zone, and it's not.
Okay, thank you.
So the request was made by Banner Estates, and I think Mr. Gary Hendren is going to make a presentation for the request.
Thank you, Jim. Should I come up here?
Sure.
Could you introduce yourself to the commission, please?
Good evening. My name is Gary Hendren. I'm an architect and a land planner. I have worked on Banner for probably the last 14 years. I've also worked in a variety of other properties in Connecticut. I'm licensed in 6 New England states as well as nationally through INCARB. But what I would like to speak about is obviously the issue of this particular section, Section 17, the floating zones. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So, just of note, within the floating zone section in the East Haddam regulations, if you have it in front of you, section 17.3.11 has an interesting paragraph which I think pertains to what we're discussing tonight. talks about design. They quote, "The design of any floating zone shall protect neighborhood property values, prevent future deterioration, promote good community living standards, provide for the preservation of the historic character of the town, and provide feasible management and control of the premises." So, and what we're talking about tonight are existing buildings that are in the community that quite frankly cannot be either developed or altered because of these regulations. And specifically, I'd also point to section 17.3.13, labeled Other Standards. Item A, the extent to which the application preserves or restores an existing building or building which reflects and enhances the architectural or historical character of the town of East Haddam. Again, we're talking about existing buildings, not coming in and building something new. What is preventing some of the, let's say, restoration of certain larger buildings that are within the resort zone is the fact that, took all my notes here, that the building, of course, as Jim quoted, can only have 4 units or 4 apartments within that building. So there's actually 2 other specific regulations in the list that would also prevent them from being further developed into other uses. Hold on. Sorry, my notes are a little cumbersome here. In section 17.5.4, it says no more than 8 units can be built upon any acre of buildable land. Okay, so if you have a building that's 12,000 square feet, it's an existing building that was used as a community center or as a dining hall or something like that, according to the bylaw, you can't put more than 8 units in it. Okay? Something that of that size would normally take 10 to 12 units within that building. So that's a restriction that doesn't actually make sense if an existing building is larger. There's also 17.5.7. It says the maximum size of any detached building should not be more than 6,000 square feet. But again, these are existing buildings that were built before the bylaw went into effect that are already larger than 6,000 square feet. So according to the bylaw, I can't even present that as a proposal for a building permit because it's too big. So it's impossible to restore the building or impossible to preserve the building or put any money into it because it would break the bylaw. And then of course there's the last one, 17.5.6, that there should not be more than 4 dwelling units in any one building. So there are buildings out there on existing properties that don't meet these requirements, that are impossible to restore, preserve, or reuse to another use. So what's in the request is to take those 3 particular items and make it part of the ability for the board to waive those requirements under a special permit. Okay, and when you're doing, not asking to change the bylaw, okay, you're asking to have the ability to come in and illustrate and show what can be done with a building that's bigger than 6,000 square feet, because it exists, it's out there. Make it economically feasible to preserve the building, so it doesn't just sit there and rot and fall down. So we need at least the ability to apply for a special permit to present the reason we want to take a 10,000 square foot building that exists and turn it into something that's economically feasible to preserve it, to restore it, or effectively it'll sit there and rot and fall down. Perfect example that I found just on the internet was, I'm sure everybody's familiar with the Grandview Hotel, that basically rotted and fell down. It gets to a point where the building department has to come out and condemn the building, and it has to be taken down. And quite frankly, that was a waste of resources. It was a building that's sat vacant and didn't produce tax revenue. So the purpose of this request is to be able to restore these larger buildings into something that A, is feasible, B, produces taxes that can be brought back into the community, and C, the building's there already. We're not asking to build a new building to be done that way. So that is the reason for the request. Any questions?
Anything else?
That's all I have on my list.
Okay. Questions from the commission?
I have a question. What makes this different than, say, the Champion House that has more than 4 units in a building?
So the Champion House, prior to our East Haddam Village regulation change, which we adapted back in 2005.
Yeah.
You know, we went through a comprehensive change. Prior to that, the Champion House was a rooming house that, well, it has what, nine units, 12 units, something like that. So when everybody came in for the Champion House, they said, well, it's in a 1 acre zone, so it's a pre-existing non-conforming structure. So now that we changed the regulation to allow that use and others similar in the zone, now someone can come in and say, well, it's got zoning approval through our regulation change, so it's an approved unit. The difference is these set of regulations were written in 73 that didn't envision taking a larger structure and using it for something residential. It just wasn't brought on the table, and in the history of it, it's never been brought up until now, and so that's why it's here.
Can I make one other comment? Again, there's several zones within the town of East Haddam, and under the LTSP zone, under 17.7.4, they don't restrict the number of units or the size of the building. What they do say is you have to demonstrate compliance to the East Haddam Village District regulations, the Public Health Code, and the Building Code. So again, there's flexibility within the different sections of the zone, of your regulations. If you applied that same restriction to the resort zone, then again, it would be a matter of coming in, demonstrating the design of the building, and then proving that it can be brought up to code, which today's building code is much stricter than the code that these buildings were built under. There's fire safety, there's alarm systems, there's sprinkler systems, there's all sorts of safety items that you still have to conform to. So it is an existing building that now, at least the ones I know of, don't have sprinkler systems. They're wood buildings. What's going to happen in the future? They're abandoned, so they're deteriorating from weathering, but there's also the potential for fire safety that would be brought into compliance if they were allowed to be built. But to come into a 10,000 square foot building and only do 4 units doesn't make any sense. It's too big, who can afford them? And you can't afford to come in and restore the building. It has to be brought up to building code. We're talking energy code, insulation, mechanical systems, sprinklers. There's a lot of expense to bring these buildings back to life. And so there needs to be just some flexibility built in to at least present a viable solution. Any other questions?
Yeah, so this is basically giving us, or allowing special exception through the board, what they're seeking?
Presently, because it's written as such, no more than 4 and no more than 6,000 square feet. Anybody in the resort can't even apply. So if a regulation is written to where they can apply, that's when the commission does the I call it the nuts and bolts of a review for an actual submittal plan, which covers septic, water, parking, landscaping, lighting, the whole kit and caboodle. But right now, zoning is one of these regulations. If it isn't there, you can't apply for it. So that's,
So it still has to come before the board before anything changes.
yes, anything in the floating zone is all special exception. So it always has to come to the board in public hearings.
How many buildings in the resort district are over 6,000 square feet?
So the biggest ones, I think, off the top of my head, obviously, is the one at Banner. Clark Crest has a large building that was it was kind of like their dining hall, and there's a wing that goes off the back that's a kitchen. So there'd be an example that if they're in that zone, so if they ever made a decision that they wanted to apply for floating zone status, that was it. It's close at Cave Hill. Obviously, now we don't, with Sunrise or Frank Davis Resort being picked up by the state, that would have been a potential. There's not a lot, but
Are you saying Cave Hill has one?
close. I'm not sure. I didn't do the square footage.
How about Johnsonville?
Actually, I misspoke. Johnsonville is the one thing that Ray Schmidt covered out for a historic district, and it's in a half acre. Remember, he did that. So that's in a half acre zone, so it doesn't count.
That's not in resort.
No, it's not. I
Okay.
forgot about that. That was carved out about the same time this regulation was written, 1976.
What about Wolf's Den? That used to be a resort. Is that still a resort?
That is out there in purgatory. That is a pre-existing non-conforming camp. It just they never extended the resort zone out there for it. It has its pre-existing status. At the time that the zoning regulations were revised from 1 acre to 2 acre, there was no request made because part of the concept of pre-existing non-conforming is you can't expand. Well, they kind of had, I think even back then, maximized their sites through a review back then. So they were maximized out there, so they obviously felt that there was no need for them to come and request for the resort zone status.
Since presently we have a limit of 4 per building, why wouldn't we have a limitation on buildings over 6,000 square feet?
I was in high school when this was written, so I have no idea.
There are some restrictions because there's minimal unit sizes. So you can't just go in and, say, okay, I got 10,000 square feet, I'm gonna put 20 units in there, they're only 500 square feet. Because within the bylaw, it's a minimum
When you say
size.
bylaw, you mean regulations?
I'm sorry, it is the regulations.
Yeah.
So one bedroom, for instance, I think it has to be 650 square feet or something. So just by doing the math, you are limiting the number and the size.
600, yeah.
Yeah, so and plus you take out 15% for circulation, and then suddenly, you're already limited. It's an existing building, you have unit sizes, and that'll limit how many units you can put in the building.
Yeah, how many times does 600 go into 10,000?
Well, take out the hallways and the staircases, and it's 8,500, and 600 into 8,500. Who's the math major?
12,
About 12.
13.
Yeah,
Yeah.
11 or 12.
So there are restrictions on what you can do.
And efficiency are 450.
Yeah, and these have not changed since, and if you look at the original 70s regulation, back then they talked about the applicant coming up and making a decision at that time whether it be seasonal or year-round.
Right.
That was how it was written. Now it has been amended where it's just year-round. There isn't a seasonal discussion, but because the resorts were kind of floating, I think they were, I assume, they were trying to find another avenue to make these, reuse these resorts and somehow, whether it was timeshare or whatever it was. But, they had some flexibility for that also. But the unit size has not increased, as a minimum, that has not increased throughout the decades.
For a minimum.
For a minimum, right.
And those meet HUD standard, and they also, a lot of unit sizes controlled by the market. You know, and I do, again, a lot of work in a lot of cities. There's compact living standards in the city of Boston now that make these look large. So, and there's a whole new bylaw under compact living, which I won't go into, but just to let you know.
Hey, folks, sir. It's not open to the public, please. He's in front of the commission, it's right now. I have not opened it to the public, please.
So, yeah, I probably shouldn't have brought it up, but again, the minimum sizes here do meet HUD standards, and like I say, there's a lot of variation in unit sizes these days, but those minimum standards would have to be met, and usually either met or exceeded because of the market demand.
Any other questions from the commission at this time? I will open it to the public. You will raise your hand and I will call on you. And I need your name and where you live, please. Ma'am.
My name is Lynn Amutis Sequist. I live on 79 Cherry Swamp Road, Amutis.
And all questions will be directed to this commission.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I own Banner Lodge. I owned a condo. Banner has asked to take my condo and give me a place in exchange, which never happened. So I own and I pay taxes in Banner Lodge. I don't know what I own. I've never gotten it straightened out. I've hired 2 attorneys. It never gotten straightened out. This is an old Banner story that just continues on. Before me, it happened previously to the other people.
And how is this relating to what is in front of us at this time, ma'am?
So at this point, they want to make extra buildings out of the large building. And they want to make it into small efficiencies and bring in a lot more people. Now they're telling you the square footage of the buildings that they want. I just can't see how they can make any kind of adjustments with anything right now until they straighten out what they've done in the bylaws and whatever was previously. So I don't see why they would change it till they straighten out what they already have in the mud.
I guess for the record, I can't help, we're not a body that can help whatever happened. That's not us. We're dealing with possible changes in our floating regulations, and that's all I can deal with.
All right, but that's in the area where I live. So
Okay.
that is extra people, extra, areas. They're selling part of the land that's there. So I don't know if they're still bringing it out on Banner to Cherry Swamp. The area already has housing that's half built that they've never completed. And now they're talking about a 10,000 unit building that they use for a restaurant and such that's not working out, and they want to make that into living quarters for how many more people? He says 13. But then you can go down, well, you can make 13 or 16 units.
12, right?
So, no, you could 6, but let's redouble this. Unfortunately, this commission is really here for a regulation request as presented. It's not only for Banner, it's for all the other resort zone structures. So we really are dealing with that request. I understand there's a 30, 40-year history on this site, but that discussion would come probably the next round when an application from an entity wants to do something. Right now, everybody kind of has to adjust the mindset to, we're talking about taking resort zones and reusing existing structures and allowing them to have more than 4 units, which is the requirement now, and having more than 8 units on an acre. That's the request for the amendment. There's a ton of people here, and it just, I got a feeling that almost everyone wants to say, I want to talk about the past, I want to talk about the past, I want to talk about the past. And I understand your frustration not being, this isn't the avenue, unfortunately. Today is about thinking about if the commission allowed any of these buildings that are over 6,000 square feet in a resort zone, what's the impact? What do you think about that? not the past performances and
So my
stuff.
question to you would be then, why is it only one person presenting that he wants to change that at Banner?
So-
Where are the rest of the
So
6,000 square foot people?
I can answer that. Typically, nobody wants to run the gauntlet. You can see why. But the commission has to, when requested and a fee is paid, has to hear the application. Has to. And so here we are. A lot of people, in the other spots are happy what they're doing right now. Probably just said, I don't want to get involved, don't want to do it. But the commission can't, when they have a request, just say, well, you didn't round up the entire crowd. They have to hear the request that's before them. And they have to make a decision at the end of this night or next night or whenever as to, does this benefit
All?
or not? No, it has to be a benefit all, based upon the information laid out tonight. So everybody has to think about taking an old structure, is there a reason why it shouldn't happen or not, and bring that today. When there's an application about a certain property and a certain site, and there's some things that you think the commission should consider in their deliberation, that's what they can do on a site specific.
Query, can I ask a question?
Yeah, hold on one second.
Is Fox Hop Yard Golf Course in a floating zone?
Yes,
It is.
yes.
How large is that building? Clubhouse?
Well, and it wouldn't have fit for this application because
wouldn't.
it
Oh,
did,
this
no,
is resorts.
because
I'm
this is
sorry.
resort and that is the 2 to 4 acre
Yeah.
zone, which
All
we
right.
have a different subsection
I
for.
stand corrected, yeah.
And the same thing falls for where we have the planned residential development for senior housing. So
Exactly.
they're different. It's been broken out that way. We're one of the few towns that even have this flexibility, but it's there.
So we're looking at basically Banner, Cave Hill maybe, and
Clark Crest, yeah, there's a resort zone areas, yeah, with large buildings, yep.
4-H camp got anything like that?
I don't think they have a big enough building, yeah.
what was that question, Jim?
4-H doesn't have a big enough building.
And Denellan's. they
They're
don't-
subdivided.
This would help 3 properties tops. I apologize, Barry.
Yes, ma'am. I need your name, please, for the record.
Sharon McClelland, I live at 9 Pinehurst in Banner. And my feeling on this is that why would we want to change, if something is called a resort area, why would we want to change it when it's an original plan was to be not a commercial building, but to be a resort? Or you're taking away what it was to begin with. So I don't think they should be allowed to change.
Sir.
Hi, my name is Joe Busher. I'm from 51 Dulvia Hill Road. I just had a few comments. I'll try to be very brief here. My understanding is that the application you're looking at is to amend the regulations. The proponent here seemed to indicate this was going to be just a means to a special exception application, but I think we need to take into consideration the bigger impact, not just to this site, but also throughout the town potentially, because this as an application to amend the regulations is something you guys have discretion for. It's not something that if he checks all the boxes, he's entitled to an amendment of the regulations. But once you make the regulation amended, if you make the proposed amendments, if the applicant comes in and checks all the boxes, my understanding is entitled to then get the application approved. There's a lot less discretion in the second step, which would be the special permit application. Right now, the commission has a lot of discretion as to whether they amend the regulations or not, but the second step that he's looking to, you'll have a lot less discretion. So this is really, to me, the most important part of the analysis. And then because it's an amendment to the regulations, you look to the statutes. Section 8.2 of the statute sets out all the criteria that you can look to for developing regulations in the town. I don't believe that the proposal here has addressed any of those criteria. There's been nothing about the character of the town, whether this would be in conformity with the character of the town, whether this is in conformity with the overall plan of the town that you mentioned just was redone. There's no indication that this meets any of that, or would propose, or forward or support the town plan. There's nothing in here about one of the other criteria, density of housing. Doesn't address whether that's a conformity or not, whether it would help or hurt in that regard. Nothing in here about traffic that has been mentioned, how, changing this would impact traffic throughout the entire town. Because I don't know where other examples would be that would potentially come within this. So I don't think he's met the burden that would need to be made to satisfy someone here to make a drastic change like this to the regulations that could affect various parts of the town, and then box you in because your discretion is going to be limited when applications come up down the road. I want to build multi-unit housing in one of these zones. We don't even know where these zones are. That hasn't been established by the applicant here. Also, these particular regulations, there's no limit, there's no limit whatsoever. It just says you're not, if you meet these criteria, the limit of 8 per acre or whatever doesn't apply. But there's no upper limit. You're just taking away the prior limit. So I think that is an issue. And that's all I have for comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir, in the back.
My name is Bob Wheeler. I live at 7 Pinehurst Drive. And my question is, back in December of 2016, the developer was approved under his phase 3 approval for 247 units. I understand that if he takes the density and puts 16 units in here, he has to reduce those 247 proportionately to allow for the development. My question is whether this opens the door in the future that it sets a precedent that he could group 4 or 10 of these approved 47 approved units and start building apartment houses. And does whatever that approval, I don't know what the approval said, but if it said a square footage, you say 1,500 square feet per building, does this open the door for him to reduce that square footage down to 600 square foot units? And possibly just build apartment buildings instead of completing the rest of the development in the character.
No, it only goes to buildings that were built prior to 71, was it, or?
73. I think you're asking two questions.
Yeah.
First question is, if I heard you right, first question was, does the ability allow him to build additional more than 4-unit buildings? And the way this regulation is written right now would only deal with existing structures that existed at the time of the floating zone application. The second question you asked, I thought, was he has an overall plan, and the plan has the 247 units, which he had submitted and was approved, and they all have their square footages and all that. Could he come back and change the square footage size and build 4 units at the minimum criteria of this regulation? He could, if he came back and reapplied his special exception approval for review. But he'd have to come back.
Does this open the door and make that an easier process for
him? Not particularly, because the regulation exists for the smaller units. The regulation's been there forever. So if sometime down the road they said, we have a plan that has, in this wing, there's 30 units, they're all 1,800 square feet, we want to amend it, they'd have to come in with, just like before, the traffic was already taken care of because they're single-family units. We had that engineers in review, but they'd have to come in with new drawings, new parking, new drainage calculations, because everything changes, and it would have to be reapplied and brought through for the public hearing, because it would be a change. Lighting, architecture, the whole 9 yards.
Yes, sir.
Joe Garofalo, 1 Pinehurst Lane. My concern is in zoning, which you have to consider is pre-existing. The other sites you're mentioning don't have condominiums. They didn't buy a certain product in a zone where our property values would sink. It would would be the last nail in our coffin there. If you start putting in rezoning something, you have to consider what was zoned there before and what we've done there. And now you're gonna change all that and just put in or change it so that that whole area will change from ownership to whoever could afford it for a year or whatever a lease would go for. So I would like you to look at the big picture and say, there's people there that invested in the town under these regulations, under what was in the books, because I thought it was the condos that were going there. I didn't know at some point they could change it and put in apartment buildings. And I just would like you to do a site walk and see what's out there when this comes to fruition and see what's there now. Because you don't want what is being left there in an apartment building.
Dennis Shorthouse, Cherry Swamp Road.
I'm sorry, did you catch his name?
No.
I'm sorry.
Shorthouse, Cherry Swamp Road.
Okay.
I have two comments. The first one, I agree with what this gentleman here said. There doesn't seem to be any upper limit. You're just taking what was 4 buildings, a building can only have 4 units, and then just saying, you know, instead of giving an upper limit, there is no limit. You're limited into basically a maximum the number is left to the developer to develop how many units he can squeeze into a building. And then 2, you're saying that it's buildings that were original to the site at the time of the floating zone application. It almost seems like you're giving them two bites of the cherry, that you can take at the time of the application, there was a use for these buildings, or the building use should have been stated on the application. Now you're saying either by mismanagement or the conditions that this no longer works, and we want to convert it into whatever we want, basically, so into residential units to a building that wasn't originally designed or approved for that use. That was my comment.
Okay, thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Michael Callahan, 21 Augusta Circle. I am actually president of the Homeowners Association of Banner. We have a letter signed by 16 owners that we'd like to put on the record to disagree with the proposal.
Would you like to read it into the minutes, sir?
Pardon?
Would you like to read it into the minutes?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
Well, do you want me to read it, or do you want me to just give it to you?
You can.
Either or, whichever you're more comfortable with.
You read it into the record so we're all aware of it.
Okay, I'll read it. Banner Country Club Estates, as it's now called, has had a checkered past. The original development in the 80s went bankrupt and was resurrected in 2005. The town granted approval for phase 1 in 2005 for 86 units. In 2012, the town granted a special exception for 247 units. Again, in 2016, the town granted a special exception for 246 units. I'm not sure exactly the difference between the 2 phases. One called for relocation of 3 golf holes, the other one did not. Now the developer is requesting a change in zoning regulations, so he can again ask for a special exception for 16 apartments in 1 building, the former dining hall. The proposed 1-bedroom apartment units, not condos, would vary in size from 500 square feet to 1,100 square feet, with the majority at 750 square feet. The current range of the condos is 1,025 to 3,100 square feet. So how's this worked out for the homeowners? The initial phase is incomplete. Only 48 of the 86 units are completed. The town assessor has stated the lack of completion and poor maintenance of phase one has diminished the quality of the entire complex and reduced the assessment on properties anywhere from 10 to 35%, which is a financial hardship to the town. How's it work for the developer? So they've made their millions in initial sales. They've gotten the town to approve special exemptions, grant him a tax reduction, all with little to no oversight. How's it work for the town? Not so good, but because there's been no accountability. Tax revenues never materialized. Other taxpayers in town are actually subsidizing it because they've not been held to a high standard. And the town has reduced their tax income from Banner. The community is now viewed as a liability rather than an asset. Other towns have created strong interest because of high standards and accountability. We encourage you to enforce high standards and not lower standards and accountability as they actually work against you. We believe that a request for zoning regulation change to permit further special exceptions should be categorically denied until the town holds them accountable for the initial requirements in the first phase, which happened 15 years ago. If not now, when?
Can you bring a copy of that so we can have it for our record, sir?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I do have two letters from the Tax Appeal Board reducing the taxes on individual units, including 12 that were owned by the developer in 2017. And I do have a kind of a summary of an overview of Banner Estates that I would like to share with the commission. It's fairly
Well, what does that have to do with where we're going, sir?
Well,
I don't want to be digging up all this stuff. I think it's all in the public record, a lot of it. If you submit your letter,
okay.
I don't think that's it.
I guess the other point that I would make is that by changing the zoning regulations in town, you open the door for various mini apartment complex all over town or in certain floating zone zones. And I'm not sure that's the character that you want to portray to the town, to have multiple housing complexes all over town. With that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? The lady all the way in the back. Could you step forward? I can't hear a word you're saying, please.
Cheryl Taffer, 22 Lenny Hill Road.
Did you hear her?
To this gentleman's point, I just wanted to say that when I purchased property here 32 years ago and raised my family, we bought into the rural character of the town. And we didn't look at the property and the acreage as a way to make money. We looked at it as a way to raise our children in an environment that we felt was safer than living in the city, and that offered the opportunities for our children to grow up and to be more appreciative of their environment and to live off of the land, so to speak. I understand that times change, but when we invest in our property, we invest in that lifestyle. And have someone come in and want to all of a sudden build apartments My question is, why don't you go to Middletown and build apartments there, where there, it's the environment that people choose to live in. You can live in the country, you can live in rural areas, you can live in the city, you don't make choices as to where you want to live. But to invest our entire savings into our town, and then to have it change because it may be financially beneficial to some, is hurting the people that have supported this town for years before those people come into this town. So I'm asking you to, consider the people that already live here and the people that have supported our town. And if you open the door to make these changes, as this gentleman in the front has mentioned, I don't think we've done enough homework to know exactly what the implications could be in the future. Because once you open the door to a little bit, all of a sudden people want more and more and more. And before you know it, we could look like Middletown. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way to Middletown, but what I mean is that every town has characteristics that people want to invest in. And we're here because we like the living character. I speak for myself, I don't want apartment buildings. I don't want housing, multiple housing units. I don't want to find out that my neighbor in 5 years decides they want to split their land and build an apartment building. That's not why I'm here, so I'm just asking you to consider that. Make a decision on this, think about what you're opening the door to.
Nelson?
I'm Dale Student, 50 Boulder Road, East Town. I just have a lot of good comments tonight, right on target. I don't have to say anything because we all have anything. And we really appreciate you coming tonight. But I want to ask a question for the benefit of myself and the audience. What's the next step? We have a hearing now. You anticipate closing the hearing tonight, or will be extended to another night? And I'd like to know what the process is going to go through. Step, bring that to us, please.
I'll see what other questions we have, and then it's up to the commission whether or not we have enough information to make a decision and discuss it.
Okay, so you could make a decision tonight.
We could, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Susan Downs, 21 Augusta Circle. I have an observation. This man compared the Grandview Hotel to the Banner building, and I don't think there's any comparison. That entire property had fallen into disrepair, and the present owners did everything they could to rehabilitate all of the buildings, but were unable to rehabilitate that building. So I don't think that's a good example to compare the two properties at all.
Well, you don't need to comment, but direct your questions to us, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Okay.
fine.
It was just
Correct.
an observation.
Okay.
I just wanted to state.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Kathleen Daigle, Powerhouse Road. I'd like to ask the board, how does this benefit the town and the people that live here and have lived here for all these years and enjoy the character of this town? How does the additional traffic congestion benefit the town, and in what ways?
So can I, they haven't even got to that point yet. So that's the, you're asking the board to answer a question. Their job tonight is take all the information in.
Okay.
I suspect as staff, what I usually do is say, take all the information in. I'll make copies of Mr. Callahan's thing and provide it for him. I'll give them copies of the minutes. We also have a couple commission members that weren't here who'll get copies of the tape. My usual recommendation of a public hearing this size is I say, why don't you continue the public hearing so that you can further digest this? So that's like saying, okay, we've just found out you've got this problem and what do you think about it? It's they need time to digest that thought too. And that's the discussion that typically happens after they close a public hearing, that they go amongst themselves, pluses and minuses of any reg change or any application, they go through the pluses and minuses.
Well, I'd like to think that would be taken into serious consideration, because you have to weigh the benefits, the pros and the cons, and to change a regulation to suit one particular individual or developer at the expense of the rest of the people that lived here in this town is probably not reasonable.
Good, thank you.
Rob Smith, 119 Boardman Road. Clarification, the 247 units that were approved, I understand this board approved them, this commission approved them, but they have not received final approval from the state of Connecticut, is that correct?
The,
Or water or sewer?
no, the water is there because it's provided by Connecticut Water. The next step was to go to the DEP and get final approval for the septic. So just so everybody understands that the planned recreational or any of the floating zones do come with a maximum build-out potential based on buildable acreage. Each one of the floating zones has different formulas to go with it and different housing sizes and all that. So they, at their presentation in 2016, at the commission's request, they'd put together a final plan because they came for 33 in 2005, they came for the reapproval of the 86 in 2012, and the commission said, okay, but your next round can't be for another 12 or 6. The commission said, put together an overall conceptual plan, put the whole thing together and come to us because, and I think I can quote Mr. Thomas on this, we are not going to approve something that doesn't meet the regs just because you didn't see into the future. So in 2016, an entire build-out plan was presented, and that ended up with a entire build-out, I think, and I don't have it right in front of me, was over 300, I think it was 333 units total build-out. But you're correct, that additional number of units have not gone before DEP for final septic approval at this time.
Thank you. So, and the second part of the question is this an expansion when they were told not to, they couldn't go back for another bite of the apple?
No, if you know, my take on this is that if somebody comes in and wants to amend their previous approval, since they've reached a cap, they also at the same time would have to tell the commission which units in the overall plan were being eliminated so there wasn't an increase to the permitted density.
Okay, because I think that question was asked before.
But that'd be a round 2 if there was a round 2.
Okay. So the other part of it is that, and I wasn't clear, and I'm not sure you've had a chance to look at all the square footage of other buildings. Is there any other building in this zone or any of these zones that would meet this requirement? Or is this gonna be a single case?
No, clearly the Clark Crest building exceeds that also.
And we're not sure about Cave Hill.
Yeah.
So it would only benefit up to 3 areas.
Possibly 3.
So we're asking to change our regulations to benefit only 3, up to 3 individuals.
Yeah, and I'll check all the spots through. I'll come up with the square footage for next meeting for you.
Thank you.
I have a question. My name's Kelly Smith. I live up in Banner on 14 Pond Road. There's an old building down there, pretty good size. It was a bathhouse, now it's used for the golf course, still equipment. It's pretty good size. I mean, is there limitations? So that building's there, it's really bad. Not saying anybody would improve it, but, you know, this developer has wanted to sell his property and get rid of it, supposedly. The next person comes in, is there a limit on that building? So they make it 4 stories and make it a bunch of apartments? Or that existing building, can I raise it and make it higher? You know, is that, I didn't hear anybody say, you know, you're talking square footage there, but you didn't say how high I could go. Put multiple floors. And I don't know what the restrictions are in this town for multi-story.
Restrictions come down towards the fire department, am I correct?
Well, it also comes to our maximum height. So the 2.5 story is the height limitation, but you know, but your question about the other one, maybe that's something as if a regulation was approved, the term existing structure as it sits with existing heights and peak may be something to consider if they get to that point.
Yeah, I'm just, but I mean,
that's
I'm
yep.
talking another developer comes in and.
Valid question.
You know, you're talking about, oh, we're opening the doors, that's what people said, there's a place where, you know, it could happen.
Well, as this gentleman said, in 17.3.13, to which the application preserves and restores the existing buildings. So we're not blowing the roof off this.
Correct.
Right. It's preserving the building.
Yeah.
So.
But there's a way to solidify those kind of discussions.
Yes.
Valid point though, discussion. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions this evening? Yes.
Catherine Emitrudo, 15 Augusta. Does this board feel that the 3 different
people or entities that this change might alter, do you feel that all three are the same category, like the two campsites and then our place where we live? Are you putting them, are they, I'm kind of thinking apples and oranges. You're saying this might affect three different properties, but I'm under the impression the other two properties are campsites, not year-round.
They're just in the same zone.
Right.
So if it were to pass, then it would affect all three zones across the board, because they're all zoned the same. But they're totally different entities in the sense that this is the development and the others are real campgrounds. But they could, down the line, since it was changed, then use that
They'd be
change.
under that umbrella.
They're campgrounds now, but they don't
Correct.
necessarily have to be in the future.
Right, they could change ownership and stuff.
And then condos might be built on those properties.
Only in the existing buildings, yeah.
As they're requesting now.
Correct.
Change.
Anybody else?
Yes, sir.
Greg Daigle, 15 Powerhouse Road. I'm just trying to keep this simple. Instead of changing the zoning or zoning laws, why is it they can't come in for a special exception for this particular set of circumstances? And if Cave Hill decided to, you don't change the rules, but if somebody down the road, the other two owners wanted to come in and do something, they would come in and apply for a special exception. Keep the zoning the same.
I got it. So we had this whole discussion on another property, and someone asked me that same thing. And they said, why can't they just, if they want to have light commercial use, why can't they come in and apply for it? I said, you're in a residential zone. Yep. You have a 2-story house with enough square footage on the ground floor and the second floor. Yep. I said, so what if someone wanted to buy your place, put a doctor's office on the ground floor, and the second floor would be for residential use? He goes,
The doctor would live up there.
He goes, that makes all the sense in the world. That'd be great. I said, zoning is black and white. If it's not written, you cannot apply. And if you do apply and this commission does approve it without it being written, they will get sued tomorrow. So the way the special exception allows, the special exception is it gives you the parameters of what you may apply for. So
This doesn't, you can't apply for.
you can't apply for more than what's there. Right. And then you know that someone may want to seek a variance, but if you seek a variance for something that exceeds the density by 4 times, you're really knocking it out of the box, and there's no hardship. So the right way to do things is that if there is going to be something that is going to be approved, it has to first have the blessing of the commission through a public hearing process to amend the language to allow it to happen. And then even then, when the language is there, there's no guarantee that it's going to be allowed for a specific site based on the conditions. So someone might come in and say, well, you said it could happen. I said, yeah, after septic, water, traffic, parking, architecture, everything else. And even if it's a complete application, because but the architects and the engineers say so, but even if it is a complete application, if one of those factors doesn't work, special exception gives this commission the latitude to approve of modifications, or deny it, or condition it with modifications or conditions. So special exception gives this commission and all zoning commissions a lot of latitude, but they can't even entertain the application until it's a permitted use. It stops a lot of stuff coming to before them, because there'd be a lot of cases where I'm special, then we're gonna apply this.
I'm just thinking, instead of changing the rules where you blow things wide open, you
Well,
have a chance to
can't though.
do one case at a time.
Yep, can't do it.
But zoning. Okay. Any other questions this evening? Okay, I would make them. Yes, sir.
Sorry.
It's all right.
David Oaks, North Moose Road. Excuse me, I'm fighting a cold, I apologize. I think like a lot of people here, we live here because we like living in Lunis. I love telling people I live in Lunis and they have no idea what I'm talking about. Grew up in East Hampton, I moved here 10 years ago. I'm a 3-year-old now, 5-year-old's in kindergarten, so I want to live here, I want to die in Lunis. So I want to just, I live here because a lot of you like it. It's rural. I don't want to get off topic, but I do have a lot of questions about it. This only applies to their unfinished clubhouse with the is that correct?
So this regulation is written to apply for properties in the resort zone that have a structure, and I think I would recommend if it was ever to be approved, amended, not only at the time of the application of the floating zone, but to tighten it up a little bit at the time of the creation of the floating zone in the resort zone. So then you're only looking at those properties, like I said, Clark Crest, I will search, I'll do a property search of all of for the next meeting so that we can go through all the properties of which exceed to it. But it would be, think about the resort zone properties, Clark Crest and going down to the old Denellans, now has been subdivision, Cave Hill, Banner. If Grandview was next door and this was available for them back in the 70s, they might have used it. But that's what it applied to, not a lot.
And none of the other two properties in the zone have a building larger than, what was it, 6,000?
The Clark Crest clearly has one that's larger than 6,000. Wouldn't you say, Bob, that's over 6,000?
And they haven't approached you with the same?
No, because right now they're happy with their camp.
They might not even know about
They probably haven't read the public hearing.
How about my father's house?
So this is just related to that matter, not to the,
Close.
but I don't know all the facts.
It's a big thing there.
But I read in the East Haddam News about 240 to 300, whatever units, so that has nothing to do with this.
Correct. Like I said, if there was the regulation was approved and they came back in, they'd have to swap out units that were already approved. So the density would not increase.
And if one last thing, the gentleman the president from Banner, I would like to have his back history of Banner and what's occurred to date submitted. I don't know if he did that, but from my knowledge,
he hasn't brought it up yet.
But thank you for your time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for right now? Okay, entertain a motion to continue this to our next public hearing, which would be the 28th of this month.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We will be back here on the 28th of January to continue this. Okay.
Thank you and good night.
What? So you'll get everything together?
Yep.
Okay. Sir, I need you to submit your letter, please. We all set?
Yeah.
Ed,
We can do that in a regular meeting.
I need a motion.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll make copies and mail it out.
Any opposed? Okay.
To adjourn, so I can shut the.
I'm the
Shut it
adjourned.
down.
I'm the slouch.
Oh, boy.